हेलो दोस्तों, कैसे हैं आप सब। स्वागत है आपका फिर से हमारे चैनल पे। मैं हूं कार्तिक रजवाल। देख रहे हैं आप के शिपिंग एडवेंचर। एक फ्रेंड का कमेंट आया है जिसने ओपन सीडीसी से मर्चेंट नेवी ज्वाइन किया था। अब वो जूनियर ऑफिसर में प्रमोट हो गया है और उसको आरओआर की सख्त ज़रूरत है। उसने कमेंट किया है कि वो आरओआर की वीडियो हर जगह सर्च कर चुका है पर उसको प्रॉपर वीडियो उसको नहीं मिल पाई है। सब टुकड़ों में वीडियो मिली है। हालांकि हम भी एक एक रूल करके, काफ़ी इसके रूल्स हैं तो एक एक करके सारे रूल्स पर वीडियो बनाएंगे, पर उसमें काफ़ी टाइम लगेगा। पर अभी हमारे फ्रेंड को काफ़ी ज़रूरत है तो हम उसके लिए एक वीडियो अपलोड कर रहे हैं जिससे मैंने भी स्टडी की है और उससे आई होप कि काफ़ी उसको हेल्प मिलेगी उस वीडियो से। तो ठीक है, मैं वीडियो अपलोड कर देता हूँ। और आपसे एक रिक्वेस्ट है, आप लोग वीडियो तो सारी देख रहे हैं पर आप लोग सब्सक्राइब नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब कीजिए। आपके सब्सक्राइब से ही मुझे कॉन्फिडेंस आता है और मैं और अच्छे से एक्टिव होकर वीडियो बना पाता हूँ। तो थैंक यू सो मच वीडियो देखने के लिए, चैनल पे आने के लिए। प्लीज़ चैनल को लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें और प्रेस करें बेल आइकन को। मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। कीजिए वीडियो को एंजॉय। थैंक यू।
The rules of the road here, we have some questions that come up. Was the shrimp boat engaged in fishing? Did the sailboat have the right of way? Was the sailboat a vessel not under command? Was the shrimp boat a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver? And was the sailboat required to have a lookout? We see some new terms here: not under command, restricted in ability to maneuver. And we're going to be getting into the rules, and we're going to answer all these questions, along with who had the responsibility to avoid this accident between the shrimp boat and the sailboat. Well, by the time we get to the end of the webinar here, I think you'll already have the answers to all these questions. We're going to start out by an overview here, looking at the purpose of the rules, the book, the two sets of rules. We'll talk about that and what separates them, and then take a look at the various parts, A, B, C, and D, which cover the general rules, steering and sailing rules, the lights and shapes, and sounds and signals. So the whole purpose of these rules of the road is to prevent a collision. In other words, collision avoidance, something we definitely want to avoid. Well, to achieve this goal, the Coast Guard has come up with the navigation rules. It's a written book, about 38 different rules. They're commonly known as the rules of the road. And it states in this paragraph in the annex that any vessel that is 12 meters or 39.4 meters or feet long is required to have a copy of it on board. Now, this is going to be changing. The Coast Guard has made a proposal to require that all vessels 16 feet or more carry a copy of the rules. They are very involved, very daunting, so having a copy on board certainly helps you keep track of what the rules are. And as we go through this, it may seem a little daunting to you, the amount of stuff we get into, especially the Rules 24 on tugboat rules. You may not have seen a lot of these lights, but hang in there. We're going to get through them. And at the end of the webinar, we have some links that you can go to for applications on iPhones or Android phones or just on your internet. So the navigation rules apply upon the vessel's location. That's what separates the two sets of rules. We have the international rule and we have the inland rules. For the most part, both of these sets of rules read almost the same, but there are some exceptions, and we'll see that as we go through here. So what separates the two rules is what we call the Colreg's demarcation lines. It's written in the rule book itself, separation between the inland and international waters. Well, what is defined as international and inland waters? We show the example here of in the Mississippi Sound, where I used to sail in Biloxi, Ship Island, and Horn Island. There's a magenta line on the chart itself called the Colreg's demarcation line, and here's an example of how it's written in the rule in Annex 5. Well, any waters that are inland rules, you're shoreward of that line is the inland rule. The international rules apply to any waters seaward of the Colreg's demarcation line. In some areas, this demarcation line may be as close as 50 feet from your shore. So you don't have to be, 10 miles, 12 miles out offshore to be in the seaward, the international rules. It may be just a short distance from where your boat is docked. So the best thing to do is check your chart, see where the demarcation line is, and then know which rule applies to the water that you're sailing in. I'm going to start out by taking a look at Part A here, the application of the rules, its responsibility, and general definitions. Rule 1 is application has to do with both international and inland waters. We define the international waters as upon the high seas and connecting waters navigable by seagoing vessels. On the high seas is a key word for the international rules. And then the inland waters include all U.S. waters shoreward of that demarcation line, the Great Lakes in the U.S. portion, because, if you're in the Great Lakes area, you have the Canadian side. So you have to find the line that puts you on the U.S. side, and then the Mississippi rivers and western rivers. So if you're shoreward of the demarcation line, then the inland rules apply. Rule 2 has to do with responsibilities between vessels. Nothing in these rules will relieve you from your obligation to prevent a collision. There are no excuses. However, you do get a get-out-of-jail card. If the other vessel is not doing what it's supposed to, then you can depart from the rule to avoid that immediate danger, and vessels are required to deviate from the rules if necessary to avoid any immediate danger. So to avoid that collision, then you can break the rules. Here we're going to define all the different kinds of vessels that you may encounter and that are included in the definitions under the Coast Guard rules. First off, a vessel is anything that's on the water used for transportation. Powerboat, rowboat, canoes, seaplanes, and sailboats. And yes, even seaplanes are part of the rules of the road, because a portion of their landing and taking off, they're actually a vessel on the water. Maybe airboats, hovercraft, and even submarines. Did we say anything we used on transportation on the water? We're going to first here define what a powerboat is. It's one that is propelled by some form of machinery, be it an outboard motor, an inboard, big or small, working or pleasure. If it's moved by a prop in the water, then it's considered to be a power-driven vessel. Next, we take a look at a sailing vessel. It's defined as a sailing vessel when it's strictly under sails only. If a sailboat puts its engine on and is engaged, the transmission is engaged, then he falls under the power-driven vessel definition. Engaged in fishing. This one is always a little bit confusing. We're going to define it here this morning. Under the rules, engaged in fishing is a vessel that has multiple lines or nets, or trawls, or other fishing gear and apparatus which does, to the extent, restrict its maneuverability. These are generally the commercial boats, shrimp boats, loggers, crab boats, trawlers. In Biloxi we had a lot of shrimp boats. So they were engaged in fishing. And this is, by the definition of the rule, while their nets are out or their lines are out when they're actually engaged in fishing. If they are strictly motoring from the dock out to the fishing field, then they're nothing but a motorboat. They have to actually be engaged in that fishing. Well, how about the six-pack guys, you and your buddy that goes out fishing, and you are trolling with your lines? This does not give you the designation as an engaged in fishing vessel, because it does not restrict your maneuverability like it would a commercial boat. So the recreational boaters with their lines trolling is the key word here. They do not get the designation as a fishing vessel. Again, seaplanes are part of it, and generally they have to keep clear of all the waters and other vessels that are on the water. When they land, they have more visibility of where vessels are at, so they can land safely away from everyone. Not under command. This may be a new term for many of you. It's a nuke vessel. It has designation by some unusual or exceptional circumstance which keeps this boat from keeping out of the way of other vessels. An example of this would be it lost its steering. Obviously, it can't keep out of the way. Or it may have lost its engine. So either case, lost engine, lost steering, it gets the designation of a nuke vessel not under command. Next we have the definition of a ram vessel, a restricted inability to maneuver. The key word here, a ram vessel, is based on the nature of its work. These are working type vessels such as a vessel laying cable, one servicing aids to navigation, the Coast Guard is responsible for that, a dredge, mine clearing, sweeping vessel, or a vessel transferring people or cargo tied together. These are all considered to be restricted inability to maneuver. They're anchored, they're tied down, or they can't just quit what they're doing, so they get the designation of a ram vessel. A tugboat pushing barges is not given the designation as a ram vessel except when there's a special circumstance, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But typically the tugboat and towboat, or a tug pushing tows, is not given the designation as a ram vessel. Underway. The way it's defined in the book is you're not at anchor, you're not moored, or you're not aground. So you're underway. You're throwing off your lines at the dock, you're getting ready to leave, so you're underway. Then making way is defined as moving through the water with some form of propulsion. Your motor's on, your sails are up, so you're moving. You're making a wake, or you're making a wave behind you. And then there may be a circumstance where you're not moving, you're underway but not moving. It's called drifting, so you're not making way. The sailboat, the wind has died, so you're sitting there, you don't have an engine, you can't maneuver. You can't keep out of the way of other aircraft. Or if you're a powerboat, your engine's turned off, then obviously you cannot make way. So you could be underway making way, or underway not making way. Insight is when you can see the other vessel, observe it with your eyes. And restricted visibility is due to any of these conditions: fog, falling snow, rain, sandstorms. Any of these would be considered restricted visibility. Here may be a new one for many of us. It's constrained by draft, a CBD vessel. That's a very large vessel. It has to be a power-driven vessel to get that designation, and it's also an international rule only. There are no constrained by draft vessels under the inland rules. Next, we're going to take a look at subpart 1, the steering and sailing rules, and it comprises these rules 5 through 10, the lookout, the safe speed, risk of collision, what do you do, action to be taken to avoid a collision, the narrow channels, and then the traffic separation schemes. So you see already we're seeing the regular rules of the road driving coming into play in the on-the-water rules. 5 has to do with the lookout. Every vessel at all times shall have a lookout. It may include sight, seeing with your eyes or binoculars, hearing it on the VHF radio, and if you have operational radar, then you must use it. However, keep in mind that radar is a supplement to the lookout. The human eyeball to eyeball does not replace the lookout. So you can't turn your radar on, have a vessel avoidance capability on your radar, and go down below and not be watching what's going on. You have to physically have a body with eyeballs at the operating station or on deck. If it's foggy, then your lookout should be posted low, down low, and forward as possible to observe or hear any oncoming vessels in the fog condition. Every vessel should have a lookout. That's Rule 5. Well, the question comes up, what about that single-handed long-distance sailboat racer, one person on board the vessel, sailing around the world? Obviously, they have to sleep, go down below and eat. Well, they're busted because they don't get that free get-out-of-jail card because they are violating Rule 5. Well, that's what happens. Next, we take a look at Rule 6, the safe speed. How fast should you be going? Well, you have to proceed at safe speed at all times. It should be where you can take proper and effective action to avoid a collision and stop within a distance based on the existing circumstances and conditions. Some of these conditions may be fog, restricted visibility, so you're going to have to want to slow down. Based on the density of how many other boats are in a narrow channel or adjacent to you, how well does your boat maneuver versus the other vessels around you? At night, the presence of background lights. This was a picture in Biloxi, a lot of casinos, a lot of lights, and sometimes the stop-and-go lights start looking like navigation lights. And also the state of the wind conditions, current, and maybe surrounding objects, and it's going to dictate the amount of speed that you should be using, and also the draft of your vessel. Next, we'll take a look at risk of collision, Rule 7. So every vessel must see or must use at all times means available to determine if the risk of collision exists. And if there's any doubt, then assume that it does. There are a number of rules in the book that allow you to, an in-doubt situation. And then you can make an assumption. You always assume to the conservative and to the safe side. If it exists and the compass course bearing to another vessel does not change appreciably, then the risk of collision exists. So the formula is constant bearing, decreasing range, you're going to collide. Here's a little model of that. If your boat and the other boat are on a constant bearing, and then that range between you is going to start to close to the point where you're going to collide with each other, and you get to talk to your insurance company. So how do you avoid those collisions? Rule 8 addresses that condition. Action to take. You want to make it, of course, in enough time, and must not result in another close quarter situation. In other words, make your change, but don't change the course so that you end up getting closer to the other vessel. And always use good seamanship, because you don't want to have a near miss or too close. You want to make large course changes or large speed changes. If you make just a small course change, it may not be obvious to the other vessel. So turning 20, 30, 40 degrees, it's going to be obvious to them that you've changed course. If you slow way down, your bow is going to go down. If you're on a power boat, it's hard to slow down on a sailboat. But anyway, if you can make speed changes, then it becomes obvious to the other vessel. If you need more time to assess the situation, you can do a number of things. You can slacken your speed. You can take all your way off, go right to neutral, back down, or even reverse your engines. But you'll want to reduce or slow to bare steerage way But also consider the current and the wind so that you can maintain control of your vessel and you don't drift off into the other vessel. This brings us to Rule 9, the narrow channels. Most places, from marinas going out to open waters, there may be a channel or a fairway. So the rule states that, number one, you don't anchor in these channels. Oops, sorry boys, you're in the wrong spot. These fellows love to do this there in Biloxi, anchor there. And you don't see the green marker there, the channel marker, but that head wall there is a marina, and next thing is land, so that is the green side, and or the side of the channel could be green or red, but that is a channel there, so they obviously should not be anchored in there. You want to stay as far to the starboard side, going out and coming back in. So it's green light going and red on return. And many of us have heard the term red right returning. So your right side of your boat is returning on the red side of the channel, the red markers. There may be vessels that can't leave the channel because of their draft. So if you're less than 20 meters or a sailing vessel, you should not impede any other traffic that can only be in that fairway or that channel. I want to address here for a second, as I'm showing here on this slide, the give way and stand on. We really don't talk about those two, that's Rule 16 and 17, until we get down the road here a little bit. But the definition of the stand on is that vessel maintains its course and speed, and the give way vessel, the one that has to go around to avoid the collision, has to change course or change speed to avoid that. But we'll define that a little more in Rule 16 and 17. And some of you may have been around for a while where stand on and give way is there's a new term. Previously it used to be the stand on was the privileged vessel and the give way vessel was designated as the burdened vessel. So you may have heard those terms, privileged and burdened, and the Coast Guard changed that to stand on and give way. So that's the new terminology we'll use throughout the seminar, or the webinar. If you're a fishing vessel, you can fish in these channels because some of them may be fairly wide, or you're dragging your nets across it, as long as you do not impede the traffic of other vessels that are in that channel. So if you're a fishing vessel in there, you have to give way to allow the other vessels to proceed. You can cross the channels as long as you do it quickly, but you cannot, again, impede other traffic that's in there if you're crossing the channel. Inland rules on a river crossing. The vessels that are going upbound or downbound, ascending or descending the river, have the right-of-way over a vessel that's crossing the river. So the crossing vessel is the give-way, and the vessels that are proceeding upbound or downbound are the stand-on vessels. And two vessels that are going up, down, or downbound, the one that's going with the current, the downbound vessel, has the right-of-way over the upbound vessel. And this is rather obvious because the current is pushing that vessel down the river, and he won't have as much control as the one that's going upbound. So the downbound is the stand-on, and the upbound is the give-way vessel. Sometimes you have a condition where there is a tall building, a seawall, and it's in a channel or fairway situation, and you're not sure there's a blind spot here with the other vessel. If there's another vessel coming, what you do is on a bend of the river or the obstruction, you sound one prolonged blast, which is 4 to 6 seconds. and the other vessel hearing that prolonged blast responds equally with a prolonged blast. And then once they're within sight of each other, then they use the appropriate one short or two short, depending on how they're going to pass port or starboard side. This brings us to Rule 10, which is the traffic separation scheme. This is like being on the freeway. You have divided waters with several zones, the outbound, inbound lane, and a median in between, just like the freeways. So you have a traffic lane inbound, and the vessel proceeds into port. You have the median or traffic separation zone in between it. And then you have the traffic lane, the outbound, going from the port to the sea on the opposite side. So inbound lanes, outbound lanes, referred to as the traffic separation scheme. And then typically on smaller vessels, if you don't need to use it, avoid it by a wide margin, because these channels or traffic separation schemes are intended for large vessels, cargo vessels, shipping vessels, large military vessels, so you really want to stay away from them as much as possible. There are some even, here's an example of one in the Thimble Shoal Channel. It's restricted the size of vessels. Over here on this description, it says a vessel has to be at least 42 feet in draft to even be in this channel. So you can see that it's large vessels in there. So if you see one of these, generally on the chart, it'll have a restricted note here, and you can go to your coast pilot and read up on what is the restriction and if you can be in there or if you can't be in there. For those vessels that shouldn't be in there, they have what they call inshore traffic zones. They're on either side of the traffic separation scheme, so you can use that to maneuver those areas safely. Maybe sailboats or fishing boats or vessels that are under 20 meters would be in the inshore traffic zone area. You don't want to anchor in these traffic separation schemes or in the entrance zones or exit zones of them. And if you must cross the traffic separation scheme, you want to do it at a right angle, which is the shortest distance, and be very fast about it. This brings us to subpart 2. It has to do with conduct of vessels inside of one another. And that covers any of these vessels here. We see them on sailing vessel, Rule 12, and then overtaking, head-on, and crossing situation. 13, 14, and 15 have to do with power-driven vessels. And then we take a look at 16, what you do as a giveaway vessel. 17, the action by the stand-on vessel. And then Rule 18, which we commonly call the pecking order, responsibilities between the various vessels. So we'll start looking at Rule 12 here. I'm going to assume that many of you are sailors because you're on the Maryland School webinar, but we'll define some of these just to make sure we all understand it. Rule 12 deals with sailing vessels in sight of one another. If the wind is on different sides, so you're on a different tack, port and starboard tack, or if the wind's on the same side, you're both on the same tack. And then we have the in doubt rule. If you're a sailing vessel on a port tack, you see another vessel windward of you, and you're not sure what he's at, what type of tack he's on, then you're the giveaway vessel. Taking a look at that, the wind on the different sides, starboard tack boat has the right of way. One's on a port tack, one's on a starboard. So a way of thinking about this starboard is stand on. And then the port tack boat is the giveaway vessel, and of course that is defined as which side the wind is coming on. This side the boat is at the wind's hitting the port side, so he is the giveaway vessel, This boat here, the wind's on the starboard side, so he's just a stand-on vessel. You might look at this in relationship with the lights on the boat. If the wind's coming on the green side, you're the stand-on. If the wind's coming on your red light, then you are the give-way. Windward and leeward. The wind's on the windward side. If you're closest to the wind, you're the windward boat, and if you're further downwind, then you're the leeward boat. So the term windward and leeward defines the second part of Rule 12, and the boat that is closest to the wind is the give-way vessel, the windward boat, and then the leeward boat is the stand-on vessel. This is two boats with the wind on the same side. And it could both be on a starboard tack or a port tack. And then this is the third part of Rule 12. If you're on a port tack and you see another vessel windward of you, you're just not sure what tack he's on, and then you become the give-way vessel. Sailing vessel with their engine on is a give-way vessel to a sailing vessel, because once you have your engine on as a sailboat, then you are a power-driven vessel, and under Rule 18, then you have to become the give-way vessel. And you see this little cone here with the apex down, indicating that's a day signal. We're going to talk about these in a little bit, that you're a sailboat with your engine on. When is a sailboat the give-way vessel? Well, there's this little mnemonic that I've come up with called POW. P stands for port. If you're a port tack sailboat, you give way to the starboard tack sailboat. If you're a sailboat overtaking another vessel, then you become the give-way vessel. If you're the windward sailboat, then you give way to the leeward sailboat, the POW. Here's a picture of San Diego, Wednesday night. Lots of race boats going on. All the clubs and yacht clubs are out there with all their racing boats, just enjoying the evening. Well, the question comes up, do racing boats have the right of way over non-racing sailboats? Which rule prevails? You have the racing rules and you have the navigation rules. Well, the navigation rules trump the racing rules. The navigation rules always proceed are higher than any of the racing rules. Next we come into the overtaking situation, and this is overtaking. It could be a sailboat or powerboat. It's defined as not if you're more than 22.5 degrees abaft or behind her beam, 22.5 degrees abaft the beam. Graphically, the way that's depicted is this zone you have from the stern of your vessel 22.5 degrees abaft the beam on both sides. This zone right here, if you are in this zone, then you become the give-way vessel. Another way of looking at that, it's the same arc of visibility of your stern light. So if you're behind and all you see is the stern light, then you are the vessel that's in an overtaking situation. If you were to see partially, if you're over here, part of the green and part of the white light, then you can still assume that you are in an overtaking situation. But if it's all within this zone here, then it's definitely you're an overtaking vessel, and the overtaking vessel gives way to the one being overtaken. It's like being on the highway in a passing zone. Any vessel overtaking another shall keep clear of the vessel being overtaken. You're either side, you're the give way. The vessel that's being overtaken is the stand on. A sailboat overtaking a powerboat is still a give way, even though it's Rule 18 says that in most cases the powerboat shall give way to the sailboat. But under Rule 13, if you are a sailboat overtaking a powerboat, then you have to follow Rule 13 and be the give way vessel. Sailboat vessel overtaking the sailboat. Here Rule 12 doesn't apply because you're overtaking. It looks like both of these vessels are on the same tack, so if they were further, if he wasn't within that zone, 22.5 degrees of aft to beam, right here, then he would not be the give way vessel. But if he's in that zone, 22.5 degrees of aft to beam, then he's an overtaking situation and he has to give way to this other sailboat. Any vessel being overtaken should, of course, hold their course and speed so that the other vessel can maneuver around it safely. Next we move on into head-on situations, vessels meeting each other bow to bow. And this again is a powerboat rule. To avoid the collision, you alter your course to starboard, then pass port to port. That's the protocol of Rule 14. Remember, in this case on Rule 14, there are no give-way or no stand-on vessels in this one. They're both give-way vessels. So each has to alter course and then pass safely port to port. And this is about one of the only rules where neither vessel is the stand-on vessel. They're both give-way vessels. Crossing situation, power-driven vessel are crossing, so to invoke the risk of the collision, the vessel which has the other on her starboard side shall keep clear. In other words, the vessel to the right has the right-of-way. Let's stop here a second and look at this. Remember the red and green. Red is stop, green is go. If you're in this vessel and you see the red light of the other vessel which is right of you, then you stop. If you are in this vessel and you see the green light, which means you get to go. So the lights also help you in this crossing situation understand what your responsibility is. You're on the right, you're in the right. Stand-on vessel should hold their course and speed. And the give-way vessel should avoid crossing ahead of the other vessel. You don't cross the bow of another vessel. Again, on the inland rule, if you're crossing a river, you are the give-way vessel and allow this ascending and descending vessels on the river to proceed. This brings us to the action by the give-way and the stand-on. We've already addressed some of this. And then the responsibility between vessels. 16. The give-way vessel should take early and substantial action to keep clear of the other vessel. Again, avoid crossing ahead of the other vessel. Stand-on vessel shall maintain her course and speed unless the action by the give-way vessel, unless the give-way vessel has not taken sufficient action, then Rule 2 applies here and you do what you have to avoid the collision. If the give-way vessel has not taken appropriate action, the same thing applies. You take action to avoid the collision. When action by the giveaway vessel alone cannot avoid the collision, then maneuver away from it. The stand-on vessel must change course to avoid that collision. This brings us to Rule 18, responsibility between vessels. Earlier we defined all the various vessels, and here's a little memory jogger that may help you keep these vessels straight in your mind. New rods catch fish, so purchase some. Each of those letters stands for one of the various types of vessels that's in the defined in the pecking order. New is for not under command, the nuke vessel. R is for restricted inability to maneuver, the ram vessel. Then constrained by draft, that's the large vessels, international waters only. And then the fishing vessels, while they're engaged in fishing. And then the sailing vessels, and then the power vessels, and then the seaplanes. So we see the seaplanes is at the very bottom of the pecking order. So the only way I teach this one is if you put your finger on the vessel you are, say you're a sailboat, then you give way to everything above you. And if you're the sailboat, then the vessels below have to give way to you. So here you're the give way, here you're the stand on. Commonly referred to as the pecking order. This brings us to Rule 19, which is the conduct of vessels in restricted visibility. And if you recall the definition earlier, we looked at the definition as restricted visibility is fog, snow, rainstorms, sandstorms, anything that can cause restricted visibility. So vessels operating in or near restricted visibility. You don't have to be in the fog. Shown here, if you're in clear water, clear sky here, the fog may be over here somewhere and there may be other vessels in there. So if you're in it or near it, then Rule 19 applies. So you have to proceed at a safe speed. A power-driven vessel should have her engine on, ready for immediate maneuver. If you have radar on here, you can detect where other vessels are, determine if a close quarter situation is developing or that risk of collision that does exist. So you can take avoiding action, again, in ample time. An example of this, but one of the things you should avoid is altering your course to port for vessels forward of her beam, except for an overtaking situation. I'm going to bring this up in a larger screen. Here, you're in the here, this vessel here. This is where you're at in the middle of your boat. Here is in the center of your radar screen, and if you detect a vessel forward of your beam, you should not alter course to port. The vessel detected on the radar, you should avoid an alteration of course towards the vessel abeam or abaft to beam in restricted visibility. Again, I'm going to bring up a bigger screen of this. So here you are in the middle. This is your vessel, and if you detect another vessel abeam of you, you should avoid altering a course towards that vessel. Next we come to lights and shapes of all vessels. That encompasses Rule 20, the application, the definition of the lights. We're going to take a look at power-driven vessels, what kind of lights they have, towing and pushing vessels, Rule 24, and then sailing vessels and vessels under oars, vessels engaged in fishing, and vessels not under command. It also covers vessels constrained by draft, the pilot vessels, when you're anchored or aground, and also seaplanes. When do you have to have these lights on in the shapes? They should be on from sunset to sunrise. or any time you have restricted visibility, then your lights should be on. We're going to start out by defining the different types of lights on vessels, and then take a look at the power-driven vessels in towing and pushing. Different types of lights. We call the masthead light. It's a white light placed on the mast, generally center line over the vessel. It has an arc of visibility of 225 degrees. Now, sometimes referred to as a steaming light. Many of your electric panels will call it a steaming light. It's referred to as the masthead light. Then we have our side lights. Green for the starboard side, of course red for port. Many of you may have heard the port wine, which is red, so that's the left side. Has an arc of visibility of 112 degrees for each light. And then you have your stern light, which is white, and it has an arc of visibility of 135 degrees. Remember, 22.5 degrees abaft the beam, this is still that overtaking zone also. You have your side lights, your stern light, and your masthead light. And a lot of boats, especially sailboats, have a all-around white light at the top, which is your anchor light. Then we come to tugboats that are towing. They have a towing light. It has the same characteristics as your stern light, but of course it's yellow in type of color. And then many boats have all-around lights. It could be white for your anchor light, maybe red, all-around green, all-around blue. And then we have flashing lights. A flashing light is more than 120 times per minute. You would find these on submarines. Hovercraft uses yellow light flashing. Your law enforcement, customs is law enforcement, and the Coast Guard uses the flashing light, blue in color. And then public safety, sort of like your sea tow or boats, recovery boats, public safety boats have red and yellow flashing lights. So submarines are yellow, hovercraft, and then law enforcement are blue, and public safety are red and yellow. Then we have what we call a special flashing light. We have the flashing light, but now there's a special flashing light. What's different about it, it's for inland waters only. It's yellow in color, but its arc of visibility is different. It's 180 to 225 degrees of visibility. And it goes, flashes 50 to 70 flashes per minute, not the 120, and it always goes on the barge, inland on the barge only. The next we want to talk about the lights that are on these vessels. We defined them, what the masthead light is, and the stern light, and the side lights. We can first talk about power-driven vessels. Of course, they have to have the masthead light, the side lights, the red and green, and the stern light. That's fairly straightforward. And at night, the power-driven vessel underway will still have his lights on, all navigation lights. Even though he's not making way, it will still have all the power lights on. And if you're up to 50 meters in length, that's a pretty good sized powerboat, then your masthead light and stern light are all separate, and the side lights are separate. And they may look something like that. Once you become over 50 meters in length, then you have to have two masthead lights, one forward and one aft, and the one aft is higher. So then they have two masthead lights. So he's got a masthead light forward, one aft, the two side lights, red and green, and then his stern light, if he's over 50 meters. Here is a small power-driven vessel less than 12 meters. they can combine that masthead and stern light together. A lot of small boats you see it on the stern. So the front portion is your masthead light, 225, and then the stern light, 135. And also you see that the red and green light, the bow lights, are also combined together. So that's on a small vessel. Viewing them from the side, from the bow, or from the stern. Here's that 7 and 7 rule. Power-driven vessel less than 7 meters in length, not exceeding 7 knots, then he can get by with just one all-around white light. And this is strictly an international rule. So once you go to the shoreward side of the demarcation line, then you become a powerboat and you need your side lights, masthead light, and stern light. If you're a hovercraft, you have your running lights, but in addition to that, you have a yellow flashing light so that other vessels seeing you with the red and green in your mast and stern light also see the yellow flashing light, indicating that you're more than just a power-driven vessel. Rule 24. If you're in an area where you have tugboats nearby you, then this is some that you want to be familiar with. And the difference here is we're going to talk about the international tugboats and or vessels operating in international waters and in inland waters. Here we're talking about the tugboat, and he's towing a stern. There's what we call a hawser, a cable, between the tugboat and the barges that may be back here somewhere. So if he has 2 masthead lights, he's under 50 meters, he's going to have a second masthead light to indicate that he's a towing boat, tugboat towing. He has his side lights, the red and the green, and then on the stern he has his stern light, and he also has a yellow light. Yellow over white, my hawser is tight, is a little mnemonic that helps you remember that one. Remember, he's pulling some barges way behind him on this line called the hawser. So yellow over white, my hawser is tight, this is a tugboat, and again he has a second masthead light because he's acting as a tugboat. This is both inland and international waters. This, for the international waters, is the only yellow light you're going to see on a boat, one that's engaged in towing. So if the tugboat is not towing, it's nothing more than a motorboat, power-driven vessel. And he would turn off that second masthead light, and he would turn off the yellow towing light on the stern. If he's all he is doing is operating as a powerboat then. And that applies both to the inland and international. So here's a tugboat towing a stern. So he's going to have his green light and 2 masthead lights because he's towing. And this distance between here, there's a designation between a long tow and a short tow. Anything that's 200 meters or less is called a short tow. If he's over 200 meters, then he's designated as a long tow, and then there's some different additional lights that need to be on. So yellow over white, your hawser is tight, 2 masthead lights, viewed from the side, from the bow, from the stern. So if on the stern you see yellow over white, then you know that he's pulling something behind him. If his tow is more than 200 meters, then he gets a 3rd masthead light. So he has his running lights and 3 masthead lights, meaning this tow between the tugboat and the back of his tow, these barges, is over 200 meters. Again, the distance between the tugboat itself and the last barge is over 200 meters. That's considered a long tow. If it's under 200 meters, then it's designated as a short tow. So the short tow tugboat would only have 2 masthead lights. The long tow tugboat would have 3 masthead lights. If the tugboat is length is greater than 50 meters, then it's going to have two masthead lights, one because it's a masthead light, like a powerboat, the second one because it's a tugboat engaged in tugging, and then he has a third masthead light aft and higher to indicate that this vessel here is greater than 50 meters. So if you see them from the side, the two masthead and the one back here, then you know that this vessel is a large tugboat. From the bow, you'd see three masthead lights, and then on the stern, yellow over white. My hawser's tight. If, for some circumstance, that this tugboat is actually a ram vessel restricting its ability to maneuver, which is a rare case, then he gets to have the red, white, red lights in addition to his towing lights, the two masthead and the yellow over white and his running lights. This would be an example. This boat here cannot deviate from its course due to this is like a big oil rig that he's towing out to sea, so he can't deviate from his course, so he gets to be a ram vessel. In a little bit we're going to look at the day shapes for a ram vessel, which would be a ball, diamond ball. At night he would get to have on his normal tugboat lights, two mastheads because he's tugging, and then the red, white, red designated as a ram vessel. So if he is a ram over 200 meters, then the day shape, they have to have this diamond, one on the tug and one on the barge, where it can best be seen. This would be a long tow, again, over 200 meters. This is the day shape, so that vessels in the daytime see what is existing here. And the purpose of this here is to let other vessels know that back here is there's a space between them, and this may be a long space in between it. It could be a couple hundred feet or more, so that another vessel doesn't cross in between here and, number one, cut his hawser, or the other boat's prop get hung up in this cable. So that's the purpose of the two diamonds on there. And then he may also use a searchlight at night to illuminate his tow back there, so other vessels nearing by can see that he is towing something. This light is oscillating here. It wouldn't be doing that. I'm just showing that for graphic purposes. It'd just be a steady light. Then we come to a composite unit. A composite unit is nothing more than a power-driven vessel. So they run all the lights of a power-driven vessel: the masthead light, the stern light, and the side lights. And they would look like this from the side or the bow or the stern. This is an example of a composite unit. This is a Coast Guard buoy tender. It runs up on the Tennessee River. He was in Biloxi, and I was able to get these pictures. He's connected. This is the tug. This is the barge. But if you look here, he's connected. There's a portion of the barge that is open. The tugboat slides in there, and then they bind it together with tight cables and tighten them up. And this then acts as one composite unit. And it's then designated as a power-driven vessel, even though it's a tugboat and a barge more or less connected, but they're a composite unit, physically one unit. If you're out there and you break down, or you go out to help your buddy who's broken down, you do not have to have all the towing light requirements. It might help to have a searchlight on there just so the other vessel can see that, but you're not required in this case to have the towing lights, just because you're not. This is an exceptional section to the case. Okay, next we take a look at international water tugs pushing ahead or towing alongside. This is international waters only, and all he displays is his white stern light only. Here the tugboat is pushing from behind, what we call pushing ahead, or he's on the hip pushing alongside. So he has a two white because he's a tugboat, and he does not have the yellow light here because there is no cable between him. He's tied to or connected to these barges that he's pushing. So pushing ahead, the two whites. And on the stern, all he has is the white. He does not have the yellow. The yellow is only when he's got a long cable between the tugboat and the barges. And this is on the pushing ahead. Sorry, pushing alongside. So from the bow, they may look like this. There's two whites, there's running lights, and on the barges, they have their lights also. From the stern, all you would see would be two white lights. Here he is pushing ahead. And the point here is, even though this tugboat is tightly cabled to these barges so they control it, these are not considered composite units. These are just tugboats pushing barges. Unlike the one I showed you earlier, what was a composite unit. Inland, this is where it's different than the international. Inland, he has the two masthead lights for a tugboat, but now inland waters, he has two yellow lights to indicate that he's a tugboat. The mnemonic here is yellow over yellow. He's an inland pushing fellow. Pushing ahead or alongside on inland waters, the tugboat gets two yellow lights on the stern. Where on international waters, if he was pulling, all he has is a stern light. Pushing ahead or alongside, you just have one single white light as a stern light. But once they move into the inland waters, then the tugboat turns on the two yellow lights, yellow over yellow. I'm an inland pushing fellow. On the barges themselves being towed astern, they have the running lights, bound red and green on the bow, and then the stern light. There is no white light for the masthead here because this vessel does not have an engine. You only use the masthead light when you have a motor. So they're being pushed or pulled, so they have the side lights and the stern light. If it's over 200 meters, a long tow, then he gets the day shape of the diamond. And then at night, he's a long tow here. Again, he gets three masthead lights because he's a long tow. The second masthead lights because he's a tugboat. Next, we'll talk about the barges being towed alongside. And the barges themselves get the side lights and the stern light. This is on international waters only because this boat here only has the white light on the stern. Barge is being pushed ahead. Here the barge, all it has is the side lights. It does not have the white stern light because we don't want that white light interfering with the visibility or the night vision of the pilot that's running the tugboat. So here you would not see, you'd see the side lights, the stern light, or from the bow, and then the stern light. There's no white light on the barge if he's pushing from behind. And this is international waters, and we know that because the white stern light is all that's showing on the tugboat itself. On the barge, on inland, this is a special case for inland pushing barges. We know it's inland because it has yellow over yellow, inland pushing fellow. Now the barges need what we call a special flashing light. This is on inland, on the barges only, special flashing light, and it flashes at 50 to 70. And being pushed ahead. Again, he still has no stern light here on the barge itself, so that that light does not blind the driver pushing the barge. But he still has a special flashing light on the bow of the barge. Again, a tugboat is just a powerboat driven vessel. All she needs is her mast headlights, stern light, and side lights. You add the towing light when she becomes towing astern. Yellow over white, my hawser's tight. Inland or international, if he has barges back here, then he has the yellow over the white light. Sometimes these barges push what we call submerged or inconspicuous objects. They could be fuel bladders, or they could be dredge piping, whatever, something that is not a boat per se, is partially submerged in the water. Then they have to have all-around white lights, one on each end if it's over 25 or less than 25 meters in length. So at night it would look something like that. If it's more than 100 meters in length, then they need lights in between the inconspicuous, partially submerged objects. So it may look something like that. In either case, they have to have a diamond on it, no matter what the length, for the day shape, so other vessels know that there's something back there. They may not see this because it's dark, maybe it matches the same color of the water, it's mostly submerged, so it wouldn't be obvious that something's there, but the diamond in the day shape would show it's there, and the lights at night would show that it's there. So it may look something like this. And they could show a light on it. Again, it would just be a solid white. It wouldn't be oscillating like this. I know there's a lot on those tugboat rules. Again, that's probably a good reason to have a copy of the Rules of the Road book on board your vessel. This may not be something you run into on a daily basis in the areas that you are motoring or sailing, so it lets you go back and be able to review those. This brings us up to Rule 25, lights and shapes on sailing vessels underway and vessels under oars. Typically, a sailboat is going to have the side lights and a stern light while he's under sail. And then any vessel, sailboat, may add as an option this all-around red and all-around green light at the top of the mast. Red over green, I'm a sailing machine. But he still has these lights down here. This is an option. If it's a small sailboat under 20 meters, then he may combine these lights into the tricolored light at the top of the mast, the red and the green and the white. But you would not run these and the ones down below. You had either this or the ones down below. And this is restricted strictly to a small sailboat under 20 meters. Here was that answers that earlier question. A little sailboat, less than 7 meters. All they need is a torch. And then the rowboat, all they need is a torch. So if sailing vessel under sail and also using her motor, then the day shape is this apex pointed downward, indicating my motor is on. Sailing vessel under power and underway shall exhibit her side lights and stern light. And if their motor is on, then she has to have the masthead light because you're under power, indicating that you're a power vessel. again commonly called your steaming light. If your engine on, you consider to be a power-driven vessel, and you run your masthead light. Even if you're under sail and your engine is on and engaged, then you have the masthead light on. Technically, the way the rule is written, your props are turning, then you're a power-driven vessel. So that's kind of the definition there. Now we get into these other vessels engaged in fishing, not under command, your ram vessel at anchor or ground and seaplanes. Fishing vessels, if you're a fishing vessel, you have a red over white, and these are all-around lights. If you're underway or at anchor, red over white, I'm fishing at night. It would look like that. This is the little mnemonic for help you remember what a fishing vessel is. Red over white, I'm fishing at night. And if you're underway or if you're making way, then you have to have your side lights and your stern light on. And he only gets to the designation of a fishing vessel when he's actually engaged in fishing. If he's going from his port out to the fishing ground, then he's nothing but a motorboat and power-driven vessel. They have the side lights, masthead light, and the stern light on. So from the side he would look like this, from the bow, and then from the stern. So you see these red and white are all-around lights. So he has that designation from any angle that any other vessel may see him. A boat that's trawling gets a green over white. Underway or at anchor, all around green, all around white. Green over white, I'm trawling at night. Once he starts making way, then he adds his side lights and his stern light. And during the day, they have a day shape. They have the two apex or cones with the apex connected and together, so then they display that where it can best be seen, both on the trawling vessel and on the fishing vessel. So at night there's always these lights, but during the daytime, so the designation shows up, the various vessels have a day shape. Next we're going to cover the nuke, or the ram vessel, not under command and restricted ability to maneuver. We'll look at each one of these individually. Here is a nuke vessel. Remember, he lost his engine or lost his steering. He's not making way. Then he will just display two all-around red. And from the side or the bow or the stern, they will look like that. The mnemonic here is red over red, your engine is dead. If he is making way, then he has to turn on his running lights, the stern light, and the side lights. Again, his engine's dead, so he does not have his masthead light on. So red over red, and the side lights and stern light for a nuke vessel, not under command. And he would look from the side, from the bow, or from the stern. During the day, this day shape would be two black balls. Then we look at the definition of a ram vessel. If we recall that from earlier, it's a vessel that's engaged in work due to the nature of her work. It's laying cables, servicing the navigation aids, the dredging, mine sweeping, or transferring people or cargo is all the definition of that ram vessel. They would have the nighttime would have the red, white, and red, two reds with a white in between. So from the side or the bow or the stern, it would look like that. Again, these are all-around lights so that they can be distinguished as that from any angle by any other boat. In the day shape would be ball, diamond, ball would be the day shape for a ram vessel, replacing the red, white, red lights. So the vessel would look like this, and this is always placed somewhere in the rigging where it can best be seen, any of these day shapes. At anchor, this ram vessel would have, in addition to the ram lights, the red, white, red, he would have his anchor light, the all-around white light. So here he has red, white, red for a ram vessel, and then his anchor light. So it looks something like this. And when we talk about anchor lights, we're going to see in a moment that a vessel that's over 50 meters has to have two anchor lights. So that's why in this picture you see an anchor light at the front and an anchor light aft, or this is the aft, this is the front, and then his ram vessel, red, white, red. Then again the day shape, ball, diamond, ball, with the anchor ball. The anchor all-around black ball is the anchor symbol for the day shape for anchoring. The ball, diamond, ball, the day shape for a ram vessel. So it looks something like this. Now if it's a dredge, designation of the ram vessel, because by the nature of their work, but they have this rigging that is off on one side where they're working the channel, and the other side, and that designates which side the vessel, other vessels should pass and which side they should not pass on. Again, green is go, red is stop. So if you see the green lights, then you can pass this dredge on this side. If you see the red lights, then you should not pass on this side because he has some type of rigging that would restrict your being able to be clear of him. So from the side, ram vessel, red, white, red. Again, these are all around lights, so you can see these lights from any side of that vessel. Here's a picture. This is a big dredge. This was in Biloxi, red, white, red. He was working it on this side, so that's the restricted side. The green, you can pass on this side of the dredge. The day shape. Here's the ram vessel. The diamonds, think of diamonds as good. Ladies like diamonds. Diamonds are good. That's the side you can pass on. Balls are bad, so you don't want to pass on that side. So you see two black balls, that's the restricted side, and then this other one, the diamonds, is the passing side. Ball, diamond, ball for a ram vessel. Diamonds are the good side. Two black balls are the restricted side of the obstruction. Sometimes you'll have dive boats out there. This is commercial diving, diver down, working underwater. They have the designation of a ram vessel at night, red, white, and red. And in the daytime, they have the International Flag Code A Alpha, indicating that it's a dive boat. Now, this is the dive symbol for a lot of scuba divers, recreational divers. Some cases, this is not understood. The alpha flag may not always be understood by a lot of folks out there on the water, whereas the scuba diving flag may be. So a lot of dive operations will fly both the International Code Flag A and the U.S. Red flag with the white stripes through it, because this is strictly a U.S. understood diving flag. Now, if you see this green, 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 you want to stay clear of this because this is a mine clearing operation vessel. He's a ram vessel, so instead of the red, white, and red to designate them as a mine clearing vessel, they carry the three green lights on the spreader bars up here, up in the rigging on the yard arms. So he would look something like that, one's higher and lower from the bow, the three greens, and from the stern, three greens. So you would always see these from any side. It would look like this. Again, we see two white lights here because this boat is anchored. He's longer than 50 meters, so he has a stern and a bow anchor light, all around white light. This means he is a mine clearing operation. He's at anchor. During the day, up in the mast, they would have 3 black balls. That's the day shape. Again, this vessel is at anchor. It has anchor ball here, and then the 3 balls up in the rigging, indicating that he's a mine clearing vessel. Next, we'll talk about the constrained by draft CBD vessel. Again, remember, this is a power vessel in international waters only. They show 3 reds in a row. 3 reds in a row, no room below, indicating that it is a CBD or constrained by draft type vessel. You see the 3 reds in a row. If he's making way, then he has his running lights on. This one's over 50 meters, so he has masthead light here and one forward. The aft masthead light is higher. Again, constrained by draft is strictly an international rule that is not covered under inland waters. During the daytime, they have a cylinder up in the rigging, indicated that it's a CBD type vessel. Pilot vessels have a white over red, pilot ahead, and they use his running lights and then white over red all around to indicate that he's a pilot vessel. From the side, you would see the white over red. Again, these are all around lights, and then he has his normal running lights. White over red, pilot ahead. Well, if he's at anchor, then he's going to show his white over red as a pilot, and then his white all around white light as an anchored pilot vessel. You'd view him from the side, from the bow, and from the stern. And then during the day, if he's at anchor, then he just has his anchor ball, because pilot vessels generally have big letters on the side, painted on the side of the vessel, pilot. So you really know it is a pilot vessel. Hang in there, guys. We're nearing the end. Here we want to talk about anchored vessels and vessels aground, the lights and shapes that you would use. Remember, the anchored light is an all-around 360-degree white light, and you don't use that as your masthead light. If the vessel is less than 50 meters, then they're going to display one all-around white light, and this way it can be seen from all sides. Less than 50 meters, one all-around white. If he's more than 50 meters, then he gets a second anchor light, one forward and one near the stern at a lower level. So from the side, you would see the anchor lights like this. So if you came up alongside, you would know that, hey, this is a big boat. If it's over 100 meters, then they still need the 2 anchor lights, but they have other additional lights that illuminate their decks to make it obvious that they're a large vessel. So they would look something like these diagrams. And during the day, they exhibit one black ball. A vessel aground is going to display the 2 reds and then 1 white. 2 reds meaning it's aground, and it's also the same designation as the nuke vessel. But a vessel that is aground does not get the nuke vessel designation. It's strictly aground, and if they're aground, they're not moving, so then they have to have their additional anchor light on. Again, these are all-around lights. red over red, and the white means I'm aground. So at night it could look like this, the two reds and the one white. And during the day, the designation, the day symbol for a vessel aground are 3 balls in a row. If it's less than 12 meters in length, and when aground, you're not required to display these lights or the day shape. Because if you're a smaller sailboat, you go aground, you may not even have this type of equipment on your boat. Seaplanes are just like boats. You have the red and the green lights and then the stern light to indicate that it's a seaplane. Then we want to talk about sound signals on vessels, the definition of the sound signals, their equipment, what sound signals you use for maneuvering and warning signals, and signals that you use for restricted visibility. Definition of sound signals has to be a whistle, some means of making an audible sound capable of prescribed blast. It could be an air horn or electric 12-volt horn, or on large vessels a steam whistle. They have a definition of the blast. One short blast is 1 second in duration, and a prolonged blast, I'll save you there, is 4 to 6 seconds in duration. So it's a short blast or a prolonged blast. By the definitions of the rules of the road, they don't call it a long blast, they just call it a short or prolonged. 1 second for short, 4 to 6 seconds for prolonged. So there's various, depending on the size of your vessel, there's certain equipment that you need to have. If you're less than 12 meters, use anything to make an effective sound signal. Well, the voice is not considered loud enough, so you would use a whistle. They call it a whistle, but it's a horn. But you could use just a regular whistle. Inland, if your vessel is 12 meters or more in length, you need that whistle, and you need the bell. International, it changes a little bit. If you're 12 but less than 20 meters, then you need the whistle. If you're over 20 meters international, then you need the whistle and the bell. Let me go back over this a little bit so I don't get too fast here. Less than 12 meters, you need something to make a sound. Generally, a whistle will do. And if you're over 12 meters inland, you need the whistle and the bell. International, 12 and less than 20, just the whistle. Over 20, the whistle and the bell. And then if you get real big, over 100 meters, you need the bell, the whistle, and a gong. And generally the way on these larger vessels, the way this is done, is all electronic means. They don't have a physical gong on there, although they are required. If any electronically or electrical means of making these audible sounds should fail, they have to have some means of manually making the sounds. Which then, once we have the equipment on our vessel, there are certain maneuvering and warning signals that are needed. The one that's important here is the 5 or more short blast, rapid blast. If there's a dangerous situation or you doubt what the other vessel is doing, to warn them or get their attention, you always give the 5 or more blasts. And either vessel may sound the danger doubt signal, 5 or more short blasts. Inland waters, if you're leaving your dock, according to the rules, you're supposed to use 1 prolonged blast. 1 prolonged blast because you're leaving your dock or your port slip. And we saw this earlier, the prolonged blast. If there is obstruction where you can't see other vessels coming in the fairway or channel, then you use the prolonged blast. The other vessel hearing it responds prolonged until you see each other, then you use the appropriate 1 or 2 short blasts. Blackjack, 21. Well, what in the world does that have to do with rules of the road? Well, here's a little trick that you may want to keep in mind. 2 and 1. Blackjack, 21. 2 is pair for port, single for starboard. 1 short blast, 1 means you're turning to starboard. 2 short blasts means you're going to port. This is your vessel. And then also 3 short blasts means you're going in reverse propulsion. So 2 to port, 1 to starboard, and 3 in reverse. Inland waters on an overtaking situation. If you're overtaking, what you signal to the other vessel is 1 short blast, meaning I intend to overtake you on your starboard side. Upon hearing that, and this is international inland waters, the other vessel responds, meaning he's in agreement that you can come past him. But if for some reason there's some doubt of maneuvering, you coming alongside him on that side, then that vessel up here gives the 5 short, 5 or more shorts. So it's 1, I'm passing you, I intend to overtake you on your starboard. 1, I agree. 5, don't do it. If you're going to overtake him on his port side, it's 2 short blasts. I intend to overtake you on your port. 2, I'm in agreement. 5, don't do it. There's some danger ahead of you. And this vessel then would wait a while, give the sound again, and then wait for an agreement. On a head-on situation, remember, 2 boats head-on, neither vessel is a stand-on, they're all give-way vessels. 1 short blast means I intend to leave you on your port side. This vessel gives the 1, 2 in agreement. If not, again, the danger doubt signal, 5 shorts. If he intends to leave you on your starboard side, he gives you 2, 2 in agreement, 5, don't do it. Typically it's you're passing port to port, but there may be a situation where you're already over there, so you're not going to cross the bow of the vessel just to pass them port to port. Stay where you're at, do your correct signals, and then get the agreement, and then go. If you get agreement between the other vessel with VHF radio in a head-on crossing or overtaking situation, then the signals are optional. This vessel here wants to pass me, says, I see you on the 1. Roger that, see you on the 1. This is a common terminology that a lot of vessels will use, especially the commercial tugboats and stuff. This is meaning the same thing as 1 horn. If they say see you on the 2, then it's the same thing as 2 horn sounds. They'll see you on the 1, they're in agreement, see you on the 1. Sound signals and restricted visibility. Again, it's going to determine based on the type of vessel. And when we started out in Rule 3, we had the powerboat and then all these other vessels. There's 3 sets of sound signals. 1, the vessel is in or near the restricted visibility, day or night, you should be using the sound signals. If he's a power-driven vessel underway and making way, your props are turning, then you have 1 prolonged blast and the duration is every 2 minutes. If you're a power-driven vessel underway but not making way, then it's 2 prolonged blasts, a duration of every 2 minutes. The power-driven vessel making way is 1 prolonged, not making way is 2 prolonged and every 2 minutes. And then all these other vessels, underway or at anchor, the nuke vessel, the ram vessel, if it's anchored. This is a barge that is anchored. The ram vessel that's anchored, that would be maybe a dredge, for example. Minesweeper, CBD vessel, fishing, sailing, and the tugboat while towing, while he's working, gets to use 1 prolong followed by 2 short. And again, every 2 minutes. So it's fairly easy to remember the sound signals. Powerboat, 1 prolong, making way, 2 prolong, not making way, and then all the other vessels is 1 prolonged and 2 short. This is while they're in restricted visibility. Now at anchor, less than 100 meters in length, required the sound signal. This is boats that are at anchor. If it's less than 100 meters, it has a ringing bell every 5 seconds. And the duration at anchor is the 1 minute duration versus underway or making way, which is 2 minutes. So any vessel that's at anchor, then that signal is at 1 minute intervals. Rapid ringing bell if you're less than 100 meters. If you're over 100 meters, you have a bell and the gong. This is the 5 and 5 rule every minute. If you're aground less than 100 meters, 3 strokes of the bell, 5 ring of the bell, 5 strokes of the bell. This is the 3-5-3 rule. This poor fellow is really aground, isn't he? If you're aground more than 100 meters in length, then it's the 3-5-3-5 rule. 3 strokes of the bell, 5 seconds of the bell, 3 strokes of the bell, and 5-second gong. If you start hearing gongs out there, then you know you got something really big around you. 2 more rules to go. Signals attract attention and distress signals. Basically what the rule says, you can use anything that can, as long as it is not mistaken for any of the other lights and whistles authorized by the rules. Searchlights, as long as you don't blind the other vessel. And then the distress signals can be any one of these. And these are based on the distress signals for the coal rigs. Shooting stars, your SOS signal, square, ball. This can be any flag, as long as it's a rectangle or a ball. Orange smoke, gun firing at 1 minute intervals, your Mayday on the radio. You could have the November Charlie flag, radio telephone, the orange black ball and square. A lot of the distress signal kits that you can get have this flag already printed up. You can, being sailboats, you have the advantage of flying it up in the rigging. Continuous foghorn, flames on the vessel. This is contained in some kind of a bucket or something. Don't start the boat on fire. Parachute flares, dye markers, radio tele-alarm, your EPIRBs. If all else fails, stand on the deck and wave your arms. That is indicated as a distress signal. For those that might be interested in furthering their background or training in all these rules of the road, here is an excellent website, usboating.com, test HTM, and they have able seamen's test, they have rules of the road test, navigation, deck general, nights, and so forth, and they have all the 10,000 or more questions that the Coast Guard has on their captain's courses on this web page, and you can go out there and review them and test yourself to see how well you understand it. I know the Android and the iPads have a lot of these for lights applications. They're all free, and there's some flashcards, so anything to help you better understand it.